I'm Al Paul, one of the support analysts. Probably talked to most of you over the past few years. Today I am going to re-record my webinar from earlier this week, GPA Building Blocks. Little housekeeping before we start here. If you have a question, email it to our support staff like any other question. You folks are educators. You know that questions are great. I know questions are great, but there's only one of me, plus right now I'm live and you're not. So just email support if you have any questions. That way you're helping us manage any questions you might have, so we ensure that we're following up properly. You've found your way to community.schoollogic.com. You've found the presentation, which is going to include audio, obviously. And you may also find some documents on community.schoollogic.com that do use some troubleshooting for GPA. So that could be helpful to you. Today's presentation is going to discuss the basic building blocks of GPA. For our display purposes, we're going to be using School Logic 3.1.283. Now, SIRS 4 is very, very similar. Broadly speaking, in each package, you get to choose a GPA calculation, you get to pick which courses are figured in, and you actually run a process which calculates the average. Each package has a very, very nice report which helps you troubleshoot, and we will spend a fair amount of time in that report today, one of the coolest reports that we have in our package. Basic outline of what we're going to do on this presentation: we're going to choose the GPA calculation method. We're going to choose which courses count toward it. We're going to make sure that the grade legend works the way we need it to. We're going to actually calculate the GPA and rank. We're going to print both of those on a transcript, and we're going to do a little troubleshooting. And since this is a re-recording, you can bet there'll be time for troubleshooting. Again, this document, you've already found it, but you'll find some other cool stuff too at community.schoollogic.com. And I want to make a point about troubleshooting right off the bat. We will come back to this later, but this is totally one of my main themes. Look, in a previous life, I supported and trained school people using Chancery Software's WinSchool and MacSchool. And I'm here to tell you, GPA is GPA is GPA. It doesn't matter if it's WinSchool or School Logic, MacSchool or SIRS 4. When someone comes to you and says, this GPA isn't right, it always, always, always comes down to one of two things. Either the computer and the human are not doing the same math. They're not actually doing the same calculation. Or the computer and the human are not using the same numbers. Trust me, it has to be one of those two things. Now, we'll come back to this again later, but it's really, really important, so I wanted to mention it to you now. A couple more thoughts. My first thought, we're going to invest most of our time today in cumulative GPA. Some people call it career GPA. I just want to tell you up front, yes, both packages, SIRS and School Logic, will create yearly or term GPAs, and both of them will have basically the same concepts. So whether you're making a yearly GPA, a term GPA, or a cumulative GPA, the basic underlying concepts are the same. And then I wanted to give you a minute on SIRS 4 versus School Logic. Now, figuring GPA is very, very similar in these two packages, but I want to offer a word of caution to those of you who run both SIRS and School Logic. If you set up your GPA choices in one package, those choices do not automatically flow to the other package. If you tell School Logic that you want a credit-weighted GPA, SIRS 4 doesn't know that. You have to separately tell SIRS you want maybe a credit-weighted GPA. My advice, whatever package you set the GPA choices up in, figure the GPA in that same package. You can print your academic transcript in the other package if you care to, But you can't set up the choices in School Logic, then run the calculation in SIRS 4, and expect that the SIRS 4 calculator knows the choices you made in School Logic. I am not telling you that you have to enter the classes twice in grades history. Once is enough. Both packages see the same classes in grades history, but one package will not read the other package's GPA setup. Okay, now we're going to get down to the nitty and the gritty of some of the really basic building blocks, and we're going to start with calculation types. Let me preface this all by saying that everything we talk about today involves grade points. We are not talking about average, as in Jenny scored a 70, an 80, and 90 on her homework, and thus her average is 80. We are talking about grade points, which in our packages means you must set up a grade legend. Now, most of you probably already have a grade legend set up, and that's beautiful, because grade legends are what assign the grade points. We do math on the grade points, not on the average scored. Now, let's talk a little bit about some of these mathematical calculations. Straight GPA. Straight GPA is the sum of the adjusted grades divided by the number of grades. This is as basic as it gets. You add up the grade points, you divide by the number of courses they were earned in. We will look into this in a minute in an Excel spreadsheet. Credit earned GPA. The sum of the credits earned multiplied by the adjusted final grade, then divided by the sum of the credits possible. Credit weighted GPA. The sum of the credits possible, so not the credits earned, the credits possible, multiplied by the adjusted grade, divided by the sum of the credits possible. We will look at an example of this in Excel. Course-weighted GPA. The sum of the adjusted grades multiplied by the course weight and then divided by the sum of the course weights. Course bonus GPA. This is the sum of the adjusted grades, then you multiply by the course weights and divide by the number of grades. These five on the top part of this list are the most common. I would say straight GPA is the most common, and then most schools fall in, if it's not straight GPA, they probably use credit earned, credit weighted, or course weighted. Well, now, how do we communicate that choice that we just made to the software? Well, in SIRS 4, you'd go to the grades menu, you'd choose student average setup. And in School Logic, well, let me just show you what we do in School Logic. That's my Excel spreadsheet. We'll come back to him in a second. In School Logic, tell you what, we are going to do basically the same thing that you would have done in SIRS 4. We're going to go to the grades menu, and we're going to pick student average. This is where you communicate your choice of mathematical calculations to the software. Got a couple of them stored in here. Credit weighted came in. Let's start with GPA straight. So, if I'm in GPA straight, if I want to create a new GPA method, a new calculation, I click Add. If you want to edit an existing one, you click Edit, which I just did because it makes these windows easier for you to see. At the top of it, name it. Just keep in mind that whatever you name it up here is the verbiage that shows up, for instance, on the academic transcript. So keep that in mind. What you use here, parents are going to see. Now the next line, description, does not print anywhere that parents or students see. This is just here to remind you what up. Calculation type. This is the biggie. This is what we talked about a minute ago, where we looked at the 5 choices that most folks use. This is literally where you tell your system which mathematical calculation you want. See, there's my 5 plus those 2 on the bottom, quality points and honor correction. Those 2 on the bottom you will see in School Logic. You will not see them in SIRS. Value. Value is where you tell the system which number you want the math performed on. Wait. Which number? Aren't we going to just use the score the student received? No. One of the earlier slides, I remember, it said we use grade points. Well, where do the grade points come from? Oh, yeah. Al said that the grade points come from the grade legends. Let's go to the grades menu as you just saw, and let's choose grade legends. We're going to pick AP courses, and we're going to look at the GPA column. Amazingly enough, this is the number you're going to use in the calculation, and when you do your calculations for GPA, you will use one of these 4 columns. You'll notice this column is the only one with numbers. Pretty sure for today's work, that's the one we're going to use. So, when you tell the calculation that you want GPA, it means give me the numbers from this column. What's going to happen is the computer is going to look at this legend, and it's going to look at the student's alpha entry. And it's going to use the GPA value from the same row. So, if a student gets an A minus, the GPA that gets plugged into the calculation is 3.667. Student gets a D, 1 gets plugged into the calculation. If, and now this is a big if the row that you're in has yes for include in average. Notice that almost all of them do say yes. That's basically the way most people set these up. But I got to caution you, this is a slip-up opportunity. A person creating one of these legends could slip up here and they could say no where they mean to say yes. So if I said no in this second row, then the 3.667 would not get used. Now, remember, the grade legend gets set up once and generally left alone. So I'm not saying that it's likely yes, no is incorrect. I'm just saying check it out when you're troubleshooting. Now, in this particular case, you see that the only score that has a no is the incomplete. So what the school is saying here is, look, if the teacher grades a student as incomplete, then that grade, and ultimately that class, will not be included in the GPA calculation because it says no here. Now, it's important to note that when I say it's not going to be included, I mean it will not be included in either part of the calculation, the numerator or the denominator. Or, as I like to call the denominator, the out of. If you say no in this final column, the class which has the INC is totally ignored. So let's say that Jennifer has 6 classes, but she gets an INC in one of them. The computer will add up the other 5 classes and then divide by 5, not 6. So this class is totally out. On the other hand, look at the F grade. Student scores an F, they're going to get a 0 in their GPA, and yes, it will be counted. Now that's going to be a huge hit to Marcella's GPA. Suppose Marcella has 6 classes and she gets an F in one of them. The system will add up the 6 scores, but of course the 6th class is a 0, so you're essentially scoring the grade points from the other 5. But then you will divide by 6, not 5, because this says yes. So the out of number is 6. Ouch. Marcella is not going to like that 0 in there. Now, a final word about the fact that you get 4 possibilities here, right? You get 4 possibilities for GPA, GPA 1, GPA 2, GPA 3. Even if you want to have different GPAs for different reasons, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to fill in more than one of these columns. Suppose, for instance, that you wanted to have a science GPA. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to fill in the GPA 1 column in addition to this one for the other classes. All it means is Your science GPA could very well use the GPA column, the numbers that are already there. It would use the same values, but of course a science GPA would probably only include science classes. And I'll show you later how you would exclude the other guys. So, these are grade legends. They exist both in Schoologic and SIRS 4. They work nearly identically in the two packages. You can have as many of these little guys as you like, but I would tell you that in my humble opinion, less is more. Now, a point of interest here, I just wanted to show you a little something on the side. If we go to Core 1, notice that my letter range, my low range rather, and my percent equivalent are not based on a 0 to 100 score. In AP courses, when a teacher is grading an individual assignment or a quiz or a test, they're scoring on 0 to 100. If they are in a core class, they're scoring on 0 to 4. Okay? Now, this is just an example of classes which grade on a 4-point scale. Most classes, most of the time, of course, use 0 to 100. But in this particular school, they have set it up so that teachers can enter a number between 0 and 4. Notice that that scale is separate from the GPA scale here in column 5. I just wanted to show you an example of this. By the way, this is not something we dreamed up at Schoologic. This is an actual grade legend from one of our schools in Wisconsin, and it's how they grade some of their classes. Now, let's go back to the grades and let's go pick student average again. In student average, we had just talked about the value row. Let's click, go to straight, and let's click edit again. We just talked about the value row, and notice that you could pick GPA 1, GPA 2, whatever. We're going to leave it with GPA 1. And then the next guy is our rank indicator. This is the out of number. When Marcella's parents come into you and they say, my student is ranked 6 out of 64. The out of number is the 64. Now, where did that come from? Well, most people here will choose grade level. Come over here, and you can choose grade level, that's really common, or grad year, which is really common. And let me give you a minute on those two choices. I kind of advocate grad year for no really overwhelming reason. Whichever you choose here, make sure the students actually have that data. Now, obviously, most kids have grade level, so that's not usually an issue, but grad year is not always filled in. So if you're going to use grad year, make sure that your students have the correct one. And of course, Global Update, our friend here, can be used to fill in the grad year for kids at a high rate of speed. Now, if you do use grad year, I would suggest that you want to delete the student's grad year if they withdraw from your school. This is one of the reasons I like grad year rather than grade level. When students withdraw, most people like to have them retain their grade level even if they're not going to be in the building. I think perhaps they do this for easy identification purposes, especially when all the members of the same family might leave you. The reason I like grad year is, if I were going to not trust something, if I wanted a bigger safety margin, well, you know, a withdrawn student should never be part of your class rank. He should not mess up your out of number. But you know what? If you use grad year and you make it a point, you definitely make it a point of removing the grad year when a student withdraws, well, then that's just a second layer of security, isn't it? It's kind of like wearing a belt and suspenders. I might avoid grade level just because a history student is more likely to have a grade level, and maybe, just maybe, the kid might sneak into my out of number. Now, if you pick grad year, always pick the spring semester's year number. So if the school year is 2013-2014, the grad year for that range is 2014, because that's the spring semester. By the way, if you leave this blank, you will rank your students in the school all in one big group. Okay, so none of this 9th graders are ranked with 9th graders and 10th graders are ranked with 10th graders. If you leave the rank indicator blank, everybody's ranked, everybody in the whole building with valid numbers. The next one is a little interesting. Rank averages above this value as 1. What that really means is rank every kid that got that score number 1. Most schools work on a 4.0 GPA scale. And you have to fill in something here, and the most common choices I see are either 4.0 or 5.0. You're saying to the computer, hey, here's my very top number. If a kid hits this number, or above, automatically rank that student as number 1 in their group. Note, you can have more than one number 1. So if you got 6 kids, in my case with a 5, then they're all number 1. And the 7th kid is, by the way, number 7, not number 2. So, quartile rank is the next choice. Hey, I have never seen anybody use that in my whole life. Which brings us down to cumulative options, which is really, really interesting. You can say yes to this, cumulative options, where you are essentially saying to the computer, use current grades. But, in School Logic and SIRS, they won't really use the current year grades in the mathematical calculation. So there's no point in saying yes here right now, till the developers change how this part of the software works. If you're working on cumulative GPA. So let me say that again. If you're working on cumulative GPA, there's no point in saying yes to include current grades, because the software won't include them anyway. Now, the schools that I am aware of work around this by running a semester end update if they're in School Logic, or they run a term end update if they're in SIRS. Either way, the reason they do that is they need the current year grades to be included in the GPA, let's say in the academic transcript, which is the most common place that this matters. Let's say it's January. You got final grades in from your first semester classes. Your seniors are chomping at the bit to get those updated transcripts out to the colleges. So, this screen makes it look like you should just be able to engage, include current year grades, then go do the calculation, and the GPA printed on those transcripts would reflect the January final grades. Except it won't. I tested this. So, what schools do is they run a semester end update which moves those January grades to history, and then they run the calculation, and the system will include the January grades. Why? Because they're now in history. That means the next few things on this screen, going toward the bottom there, does a class have to be completed? What report period does class have to be in? These are all moot points when figuring a cumulative GPA. But the fact those choices are on the screen bodes well for the future. Yes, our developers know that current year grades are not getting figured into cumulative GPA, and it is on their list of things to fix. Which brings us to an important screen. We've kind of run out of room here. So we're going to click on Options. Now, Options. Remember a long, long time ago, I told you that there are only 2 reasons that a hand-figured GPA and a computer-figured GPA are not the same. Either the human and the computer are doing different calculations, or the human and the computer are using different numbers. This is the screen on which we begin to prevent the latter. We begin to prevent the concept of the teacher on paper and the computer using different numbers. This is the screen on which we tell the computer which numbers to use. On the far left, we have this column called Course Types to Include. Here we tell the system which course types to include in the calculation. Notice I've chosen this course type that's literally called Using GPA. I'm telling the system for every course in this course type which has a final grade that's been moved to history and is completed grade, it will be used in the calculation. Whoa, oh, now wait. Where did we dream up the course types? And where did we assign them to the courses? Okay, we're going to go look those things up. First of all, we dream the course types up under Setup in a lookup table, and we're going to go explore that. So we went to the Setup menu, we picked Lookup Tables, and now I'm going to type in here Course Type. And amazingly enough, here is an item called Course Type. Remember Using GPA? I had picked him manually a minute ago. Using GPA is one of my course types. So that's how we dream them up. Now, how do we assign them? Well, we go to Scheduling and we go to Course Types. And here is my list of all the courses that happen to be part of the GED. Let's go down to Using GPA because that's the one we want to edit. In fact, we'll click here on Edit. We're in Using GPA, and let's look at the courses. So I click on Available Courses and I get all the courses in my whole database. Here's a Youth Apprentice course. I'm going to select him and I'm going to say Submit. If I scroll to the bottom of this list, there he is, Youth Apprentice. Okay? So we went to the Scheduling menu and we went to Course Types. We picked the course type that we want to edit. We tell the computer down here, we clicked Edit, and then over here when you click on Available Courses, it gives you the ones you can add in. Now I'm going to X out of this because I don't really want Youth Apprentice in there. I got all my math done already. But that's how you add a course to the course type. Pretty simple. Now, let me head off a potential worry here before it even hits you. If you go to Grades, and you go to Grades History, and we're going to in a minute pick our friend here, Claire Adel. We're going to work with Claire exclusively today pretty much. These are her history courses on the left. Let's go find Art 2D and let's pick it. Now, here's the thing I don't want you to worry about. If you go to Grade Detail 2, course type is empty. Course type is empty. Right here, this guy. Now, wait. 5 minutes ago, Al told you that course type is really, really important because it's how you organize your classes in order to make sure they get involved in the calculation. So, if this is blank, how do I know that this course is being included? Well, first of all, I've got to tell you, I don't really know why it's blank. Maybe because this is a class and this happens to be a course piece of information. I don't know. But I can tell you this. You don't need to worry that it's blank, and there are two reasons why. Reason number one is if you go to Grade Detail 1 and you look at Course, this class, Art 2D, is linked to this current year course. And because it's linked, it adopts the course type of this course, which of course is Using GPA. So that's reason number one. If you have a valid course name filled in here, and if back at the ranch that course is part of a valid course type used in GPA, you're in. By the way, that brings up a side note, and it's kind of an important point. You never want to delete courses. Okay, you never want to, if you don't want to offer a course anymore, that's fine. You can make the course inactive. But if you delete a course and that course is linked to a class in grade history, that class in grade history will no longer be counted in GPA and you'll have issues. So, don't delete courses if you think there's anything at all linked to them in grade history. Just make them inactive. Now, I had said to you there are two ways that I can prove that this course, Art 2D, is being included in Claire's GPA. The other one is my really cool report. So I'm going to go to grades, I'm going to go to grade reports, and I'm going to pick GPA average validation. It's at the bottom of the list, and it is one of the most useful reports we run. I'm going to just use the one kid. That's what I'm changing right here. And I don't want to include current marks yet, and I do want to do a GPA straight. So I'm going to just go ahead and run this report. And you'll see the report comes up probably a little faster than you think it might. And let's bump this up so you can actually see what's going on here. Okay. If we go down this list, we see that Art 2D is in the mix. We see a final grade for it, but we're more interested in the fact there is an adjusted GPA number for it. So this report shows you, yes, that class is actually used in GPA. Now, where were we? We were on the student average screen, I believe. If we go to grades menu and we go to student average, yeah, we were on options, right? So, course types that you check on the far left are the course types that will be included in your mathematical calculation. On the far right, we have a column called grade levels. By the way, this means grade levels of the courses, not grade levels of the student. So what we're telling the computer here is which grade levels get included in GPA. You will notice that grade 8 is unchecked. That means any class that I take that is an 8th grade class does not get figured into the cumulative GPA. Pretty straightforward there. Now, in the middle, we have a column called course types to exclude. Personally, not quite sure why we need an inclusionary device. That's this guy. Another inclusionary device, and then an exclusionary device, which is what column 2 is. My advice is, if you don't want some courses included, don't put them into the group. Don't put them into this group, which in this case is used in GPA. It seems simple enough. Look, if I only wanted female students riding on my bus, I'm going to go to the teaching staff and I'm going to say, send out only the girls. I'm not going to take a second step and say, exclude the boys. Now, even if you don't buy my bus analogy, and that's fine, my advice to school is, go to courses, go to information 2, and say, exclude from GPA. Make that guy say yes, and then you don't have to mess with this guy. Hey, should we go calculate a GPA and see how we do? Let's go back to grades, and let's go to recalc history. This is the command where I'm actually going to do the math. Now, on the far left, you see that there are 3 types of GPA we can figure. We can figure yearly, that's the top one. We can figure cumulative, or we can figure semester. I'm going to pick cumulative. Moving to the right, the first question is, do I want to rank my students based on the averages? I'm going to say yes. Isn't that half the point of why I'm even in here? Yeah, I'm going to rank the kids. End year. How do we pick end year? If you are doing a cumulative GPA, just always pick the highest one. If you're doing a cumulative GPA, always pick the highest end year. By the way, these are the fall semester numbers. So when you pick end year and you pick 2012, you're actually picking 2012-2013. Side note, if you do a yearly GPA, notice then over here, I get 2 numbers. Well, if I was going to say I want just a 2006 GPA, I would have my start and my end both be 2006. I'm going to get 2 semesters worth of grades. The spring semester of the fall semester of 2006, and then the spring semester, which yes, really is in 2007, but it's part of the 2006 year. Because if you do this, if you say to yourself, no, I want the end year to be 2007 because that's the spring semester, You are now going to get grades spread out over 4 semesters, not grades spread out over 2 semesters. Because now you're going to get 2006 spring and fall, and you're going to get 2007 spring and fall. So if you just want 1 year, that single year has to appear in both halves. Let's go back to cumulative. I say always pick the tallest number, and then down here you pick which actual calculation do you want. Okay, you can pick one. You know, I just want this straight average, that's fine. Or you can pick both of them that you've got picked out here. There's no harm in picking more than one, and in fact, the system will keep them straight. So it really would, in this case, store a GPA, which is credit weighted, and also it would store a separate GPA, which is the straight GPA. How do we communicate that choice? That's what I just showed you. Now, the actual math. How does it actually work? Really, seriously, how does the computer do the math? Well, we're going to go into Excel, and we're going to use Excel to show how the computer does the math. Now, let's start with straight GPA. Here's my friend Claire Adel. Here's her various course names. Okay, she, by the way, has 16 courses: algebra, art, biology. You see the names. Column C here is the letter grade that Claire earned in each one of these, and column D is the raw GPA number. This is the GPA number. Remember when we looked at the grade legend, we said an A- is 3.667. Claire didn't get any D's, but if she would have gotten a D, it would be worth a value of 1. Okay, so we've got each class, we've got the letter grade, and we've got the grade points earned. The teacher entered the letter grade, and the grade legend filled in the grade points. Now, as it happens, all of Claire's classes happen to belong to the same grade legend. So every A- is worth 3.667, and every B is worth 3. This process works fine even when the classes are on different grade legends. All that would mean is, suppose algebra were really an AP class. Then maybe a B would be worth 3.2 and an A- might be worth 3.7. You can do all sorts of things. You can have different grade legends for different classes, but all that really does is it changes the relationship between the letter grade and the grade points. All you and I really care is that it dumps out a grade point number in each row. That's what you and I really care about. Okay, so the process works fine if you have the same grade legend for all your classes, or if you have different grade legends for different classes. Now, to get that straight GPA, we simply add up the grade points from each course. By the way, the answer is 51.005. And then we divide that by 16, which is simply the number of grades I have in front of me. Okay? My long form answer is 3.1878113, but if you round that down to 3 digits, like most schools do, it's 3.188. Now, let's see what School Logic got. In School Logic, we're going to go to the grade reports, and we're going to pick academic transcript. We don't want 81 kids because we'll be here all night. We're going to pick just Claire. Actually, we wouldn't. The transcripts actually run faster than you might think. And I'm going to say I want 2006 to 2014. The kid is obviously in school less than that, so that's good. I got my 9, 10, 11, 12. These are the grade levels in history that I want you to pull the grades out. By the way, I want to see the kid's straight GPA, and I want the rank included. Click preview. I'm going to get just my one student up here in a second. What did the computer come up with? Bump it up so you can see it. Run it up here. 3.188. I got 3.188 in Excel, and I got 3.188 here on the academic transcript. Now, if you don't buy that, okay, we can verify it. And how we're going to verify that is we're going to go to the grades menu, pick grade reports. Shouldn't be quite so excited here. Grade reports. But that's never happened to you, right? Pick the menu and it falls away. GPA validation report, I want just Claire. I want the straight GPA. I'm not going to include current year marks. Now, this report is so cool. Okay, first of all, I've got 16 columns worth of information here. Some of those columns you may never use. Some of those you will use every time you run this report. Now, for straight GPA, the report is really pretty straightforward, pun intended. The first thing that is important to me is simply the class name. That's column number 3 over here. Now, many times when you figure one of these on paper, you will write down the class name along with the GPA from that class. So, when you're checking this over, check the class names. If the version you did on paper includes astrophysics, and this report doesn't include astrophysics, ask yourself, why not? Is astrophysics marked exclude from GPA in the course settings? Is it included in the proper course type? Remember, this is based on course type being equal to use in GPA. Well, if astrophysics is not in that course type, it ain't going to show up here. When you're troubleshooting, is that the number used? I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I apologize for that. Okay, we're thinking about why might astrophysics not... Well, does it have a proper grade level? Because we told the computer we're going to use grades 9 through 12. If astrophysics is not associated with that grade level, it's not going to get counted. And then finally, over in grade history, because remember right now, the software only figures cumulative GPAs based on courses that are in grade history. Suppose astrophysics over there were not linked back to the proper course. Those are some of the reasons that you might have a class on paper and not have it on this report. Now, the second thing that's important to people who are using straight GPAs is, well, the GPA number, called adjusted grade GPA. Look at this column. That is the number the system used from that course in order to figure the GPA. So for Algebra 1A, the computer used 3.667. For Algebra 1B, the computer used 3.0. Are those the same numbers you used on paper? Now, let's go to page 2 of this report, because page 2 of this report is really the most helpful. Okay, check this out. On page 2, if you look at the summary, first of all, it verifies the name of the calculation. So you can go, oh, no, I wanted credit weighted. Okay, then you did it wrong. Calculation type, straight average. We're telling you, we're laying it right out there for you. This is how we did the math. And better than that, in this next row, calculation description, we not only do the math, we show the work. Sum of the GPA, oh, by the way, that's 51.0050. Okay, so here's essentially the category, and then here's the actual number. Divided by the number of grades. Well, how many grades are there? 16. It says 16 here, it says 16 here, it says 16 down here. So, to get a straight average, we take the sum of the GPA, that's 51 something, and we divide it by 16. Numerator, 51 something, denominator 16. The long handle result is 3.18781. What did I get? 3.18781. Nice. By the way, the computer rounded that to 3.2. I can see how that would happen. 3.187 could become 3.2. So, the computer, meaning Schoologic and Excel, agree. So, there's two takeaways now from this. One takeaway is, I showed you how to figure the straight average. That's what we did here in Excel. The other takeaway is, I showed you how to use the GPA validation report. Now, let's go look at the trickier calculation method, which is credit weighted. Now, over here in column F, we have the explanation of what is credit weighted. Credit weighted is the sum of the credits possible times the adjusted grade divided by the sum of the credits possible. Okay, now I will surprise you probably by telling you that I am so old that I got out of high school having taken only one math course. You could never do that today, but I did. So I needed to take this mathematically correct statement and break it down into something I understand a little better. So I put parentheses around this first clause, and we remember that parentheses in a mathematical calculation means we do that first. So the first thing we do is we say credits possible times the adjusted grade. We take that number, we add them all up, and we divide them by having the sum of the credits possible. So what I really could do here is I really could even put another parentheses here, because you got to come up with the credits possible. You got to have that sum ready so you can divide. Now, did I thoroughly confuse you? Let's go look at the actual numbers. We take the sum of the credits possible, we multiply by the adjusted grade, we divide by the sum of the credits possible. So let's investigate the spreadsheet, and you'll see that when we do that, on the far left we have the same grades we had before. Beautiful? I mean, it makes sense, right? We're not going to suddenly change up the grades, because then it's a lot more difficult to figure out what we're really trying to do. Got the same class names as before, got the same grades as before, the same grade points as before. It's just that we're going to do different things with them. This time we introduce column D, which is credits possible. That comes from the class, by the way. Not from the course, from the class. Okay? So, now how are we going to do the math again? We have to multiply the grade points times the credits possible. See, that's what it says right here in this first paren. So this is the reaction of having done that mathematical calculation. We take credits possible times grade points. We get this whole row of numbers out here. 0.5 times 3.667 is this number. Okay? Then what do? Well, the next thing we got to do is we got to divide this answer. We sum this, right? It says the sum of credits possible times. Okay, so here's my timesing, if you will, really bad English. Now add them all together and I get 22.33525. Well, then what do? I got to divide it by the sum of the credits possible. If I add up all my credits, I get 7. 22.33525 divided by 7 is 3.191. Okay? Remember, I got 3.188 before. Now I'm getting 3.191. Why? Because I'm doing different math. I'm using exactly the same numbers, but I'm doing different math because I've introduced these credits possible, and I'm doing some multiplication over here. Okay, I did this in Excel, 3.191. I think this is right. Now, let's go see what School Logic says. We're going to go into School Logic, and let's print this GPA validation up to the screen, except this time we're going to use credit weighted. We're not going to use straight. Same kid, same marks. Let's see what we come out with. Now this time when the report comes up, we're going to use more than the one column. If I knew the Jeopardy theme, I'd hum it here for you. Okay, class names, those are important. What was the adjusted grade GPA? Because that's getting used in the math. Except, now what were we doing? We were doing credits possible, right? So we got to use one of these other columns. Look, credits possible times adjusted grade. Credits possible times adjusted grade. Okay, so I should be using column number 4. So it tells you the numbers that the computer used in the calculation. I mean, how can you do better than that? Let's look at the top 3 numbers in Excel. 1.8335, 1.5, 1.8335. Let's look at the top numbers in their validation report. 1.8335, 1.5, 1.8335. So this column number 4, it's showing me the exact numbers it used. Not this number gets used in the calculation. Isn't that cool? Now, where do we go next? Well, we go down to the second page again. But and if you're troubleshooting this, you would keep going down this column to make sure that the number that is in this column equals the number that you're doing on paper when you're trying to check this by hand. So now I come in here to column number 2, page number 2, and it shows me exactly the same thing it showed me before. It says, look, we took the sum of credits possible times the GPA. By the way, guys, that's 22,33525. Here's the number, here's the number. Oh, by the way, back in Excel, 22,33525. So far, so good. Now, we took that number and we divided by the sum of the credits possible, which is 7. 7 is here, 7 is here as denominator. Oh, by the way, 7 is what I use in Excel. Okay? So it's telling you, we took the sum of credits possible, 22 something, we divided by the sum of credits possible, which is 7, we got 3.19075. Here's my numerator, 22, see, it comes from here. Here's my denominator, 7. What's my result? 3.19075, 3.191. Okay? I mean, if I moved that guy down a little too low now, I'm going to have a hard time getting him back. Don't you love live? Beautiful. Let's get him back. There he is. Okay? This is called, ladies and gentlemen, working without a net. So, 3.19075 is what School Logic got. When I go into Excel, Excel shows me the same number. It's just rounded. 3.191 as opposed to 3.1907. Okay, 7 rounds up. Just keep in mind, when you're running this report, on the option page, when you're actually running this report, back here, you can tell it to include current marks. When I do that, the GPA actually changes. Okay, let's go down. We'll do straight. I've got my one kid. I'm suddenly telling it to include marks. Now remember, when we ran our transcript before, we got 3.188. That was the number. The straight GPA that this kid deserves is a 3.188. Notice now it's up to 3.3. Why? Because I told it to include current year marks, and these 2 marks are from 2014. Before, we weren't dividing by 18, we were dividing by 16. Okay? There's 2 new classes now. So, big difference. Keep in mind that you can have this report include current marks, as I just showed you, but when you run the academic transcript, even if you tell it, let me show you. Let me show you. If I go here and I say academic transcript, and we're going to use just the one child. I always do that first so I don't forget it, otherwise I end up doing math for 81 kids. If we tell it we're going to include current year grades, we're going to still do the straight, right? Remember how before, without the current year grades, my answer was 3.188. So here's my new transcript. Notice that now I've got the current year grades printing on the transcript. They didn't print there before, but my GPA is still 3.188. Now that's not the number I got on the GPA validation report. Okay? So this is just proof that we're not quite there on the academic transcript. Development's still got to change this a little bit because currently the academic transcript only includes in its math the grades that are in grade history. Okay? Just so you know, this is the one time that the academic transcript would be different from the GPA validation report. Now, a variation on this is currently the GPA math for cumulative GPAs does not include grades earned in other districts. You can manually enter those grades into history, but if you want them to be included in the GPA math, you need to tie them back to a local course. And of course it has to be the course whose course type is included in the math. And of course it has to have the raw materials, grade points, perhaps credits. Definitely it has to be completed as part of the course record. Let me show you here what I'm talking about. We're going to go into grades. We're going to pick grade history. And instead of using Claire, we're going to use this other kid here, Jake. And Jake took this zoology class at a different district. That's the class, zoology. But notice that this operator has tied it back into a local class. Because of that, these 4 GPA points matter, and because it's completed also. So if you're going to bring in classes from other schools, that's fine and dandy. If you want them included in the math, those classes have to be tied back to a class that's from your district. This again is real data from a Wisconsin school. The grades are changed, the names are changed, even the logins are changed, but they have gone out of their way to set up a series of courses called out of district. And the only kids that get assigned, the only time those are used, is they're used in this tie-back thing in grades history. And as I said, you never want to delete courses, because as I just showed you, you got to have the course there to tie it back. If I delete the course in current year, I am going to screw up my grades history, and I'm going to have unhappy parents. So if you don't want to teach a course anymore, that's fine. Go to the courses, go to information tab number 2, and tell the computer to exclude from GPA. You tell it right here. And of course, you could also take that course and not, well, you don't want to do this. Just tell it to exclude it from GPA. You know what? I just told you the wrong thing, and I apologize for that. What you really want to do here is you want to tell the computer, hey, we are going to not teach the class. You don't want to say exclude from GPA. You just want to make the class inactive, and you make the class inactive actually back over here. So we wanted to show you that, because if you take a course that you don't want to teach and you suddenly say excluded from GPA, then you're going to have a problem. It's not going to work right in your grades history. Okay, beautiful. Sometimes that gets a little bit tricky, but we will survive. Let's go back to there. Now, everybody take a breath. Those were the basics of how GPA gets defined, how it gets calculated, how we take a bunch of small pieces, they lead up to this bigger process. You've got course types. Remember, you got to have course types that are assigned to the courses you think they are to be included in the calculation. And I gave you 2 really nice tips there. When a parent tells you his hand-figured GPA is different than yours, remember, it can only be one of 2 things. He's using different classes than the computer, or he's using a different calculation. And I showed you how to use the GPA validation reports. So those are 2 really nice tips. I showed you where the calculations were picked. I showed you how a couple of them work. As for different classes, I showed you that there are 3 ways to include or exclude a course. You must have it in the proper course type. You must have entered the proper raw materials. And by that I mean grade points. Sometimes you also need credits depending upon which calculation you've chosen. The other raw material is the class must have a proper completed status, and as we showed you there at the end when we were kind of mumbling around there in courses, you must not have checked exclude from average. If you check exclude from average, the computer's going to really do what it says. It's going to exclude the course from average. But I promised you some troubleshooting too, didn't I? Okay. It's cool. Troubleshooting. Kind of some random thoughts here on troubleshooting. First of all, remember, if you're a hybrid school, meaning you run both Schoologic and SIRS, if you wish to produce GPA-related reports in both packages, you must enter identical information into both packages. Remember, I said if you take the doggone Schoologic settings and just leave them, SIRS 4 doesn't know about them. SIRS 4 won't read Schoologic settings and vice versa. Grade legends. Remember we showed you the grade legend screen. Let's go look at the grade legend screen here again. We go to grades, not history, grade legends. Okay? Now, make sure that whichever of these GPA columns you decide to use, you may use one, you may use more than one, make sure they have the correct values. Make sure that include in average is set to include the grade points you desire. Remember, we had all of ours set up here to yes, except for the INC, the incomplete. That guy got a no. He is not going to be used. Courses. Let's go look at the course screen. You can mark on your course, exclude from GPA on your Information 2 tab. That'll knock this course out. You should verify that your course is in the proper type. You know, here I am in Advanced Art. Is that supposed to be used in GPA? If yes, it needs to be in a course type that is used in GPA. If you have a weighted GPA, if that's how your school does it, here's where you enter the weights, 1.0. Okay? That matters. If you use credit weighting, the general parameters for your credits, by the way, remember this business about currently, I said you want to make a class inactive. You don't want to delete it, a course rather. These are courses. Here's where you make it active or not. It's this thing called currently offered. Self-explanatory. If you say yes, it's active. If you say no, it's inactive. But no is better than deleting it. Now, the credit business, you're going to set the general parameters here. You're going to say that any class made from this course is going to offer between 0 and 0.5 credits. But when the calculation actually takes place, where it's getting the credit number from is it's getting it from the class, because in the class there's only one number. There's not this range business. The computer needs one number when it's calculating a GPA that's going to somehow include credits. Check your CUME GPA setup. That's here if you go to grades and you go to student average. Your student average setup is probably the most important form to check when you're troubleshooting. Is the calculation type, this guy here, let me make him brighter for you, credit weighted in this case, is that the calculation type you want? By the way, our owner's manuals explain all of the calculations. So, and we'll probably be putting some troubleshooting tips up on the internet, community.schoologic.com. Is the rank indicator what you expect? Grade, level, grad year, whichever. Let's look at options, because options is huge. Make sure that you include the course types that you want. And if you've got a really persnickety kid, a really pesky kid, you can't figure out what's wrong with his GPA, make sure that not only have you checked the right course types here, but that the right courses are in this type. I mean, it's fine to say used in GPA, but if biology, somebody slipped up and biology is not checked off as used in GPA, then biology is not going to get included. Over here, we got grade levels. Most people, most of the time, do not include grade 8. Okay. Course types to exclude. Do you have any of those? Okay. Recalculate screen. This is interesting. Recalculate screen. Do you pick cumulative? Yeah, I'm going to pick cumulative. Am I going to rank my kids? Yeah. When you pick cumulative, what year do you pick? The highest possible. Okay, and then did you pick the right thing here? Because if you pick the wrong average, you're going to get numbers that you don't want. Student history. Final kind of checkpoint here in our little troubleshooting map. check the grades in the grade point field, meaning open your course and check the GPA number. Okay, we told it, right? We told it in the calculation we're going to use this field as opposed to this field. Check your numbers. Verify that the grades you are expecting to find are really there. Check the courses and make sure that no course is marked exclude from average. That does what you think. Verify that each history entry is linked to a course. That's up here. Is it linked to an active course? If the history is linked to an active course, the course name appears here. By the way, courses are linked during the term end update. So most of your entries will be linked if they were entered into history during a term end update. GPA validation. Remember the GPA validation report? This guy is huge. Okay? This is a great report for two purposes. First, it's a great report for actually troubleshooting. Secondly, it's a great report because it lists all the history courses included in GPA and is very nice to hand over to the students and parents. Students and parents have some kind of problem, show them how to use this report and then give them the report. On this report, check each course listed. If a course you are expecting to see here is not listed here, check your course types. You may have missed the course. Or you may have missed the fact that it's not linked properly back in history. Check the grade excluded column. Now that's something that SIRS has on this report that the School Logic version of the report doesn't have. There's actually a column in SIRS that says grade excluded, and it does what it says. Verify the calculation type. Remember, we come down here on number 2, page number 2, it tells us what calculation type am I using, and it shows us the map. If you are comparing this GPA to one in a manual calculation or one in an Excel file, make sure that the specific parts of the calculation, numerator, denominator, result, are all the same. Okay? As well, review the courses included to make sure that one course isn't on the report but is lacking from the handheld, figured one. Because that does happen. Absolutely. That, ladies and gentlemen, would be the basic points of GPA setup and GPA troubleshooting. Remember, most important thing you learned today, when that parent comes to you and says, my Johnny's GPA isn't right, it's going to be one of these two things. Is the parent and the computer using the same calculation? Are they doing the same math? And would the parent and the computer be using the same numbers? And the number one way that goes awry is if the computer has been told not to include certain classes, usually because they're not in the proper course type. That's where it starts. We will have this presentation, as you've already found, up on community.schoollogic.com, and we'll get some troubleshooting documents, probably one, up there within the week. So, thank you so much for your interest. We have had a really positive response to this series of webinars. We are going to continue this series of webinars. We thank you for your response. We thank you for your input, and have a great day.